Here are the American moon missions that weren't Apollo. I should start with the Pioneer series of missions. The goal of the Pioneer missions was to launch the first probes toward the moon. These missions lasted from Pioneer 0 through 4 and also include P-1, P-3, P-30, and P-31. These missions lasted from August 17, 1958 through December 15, 1960, and were almost all unsuccessful. These failures usually included an explosion or the craft not reaching escape velocity. Within the sea of failures, however, the Pioneer program managed to pull a huge step up in mission quality for at least one mission, when Pioneer 4 attained success. The goal of the spacecraft was to do a flyby of the moon and snap pictures along the journey. On March 4, 1959, the probe passed the moon at 37,000 miles. The initial goal, however, was to pass the moon at a distance of 20,000 miles away. This prevented the imaging equipment from working properly, deeming this mission under the designation of partial success. This probe did not end with an impact, but instead is out there still after it entered a heliocentric orbit. Even today, the spacecraft is still floating out there. Moving on from the Pioneer series of missions, the Ranger series, which the relevant ones lasted from January 26, 1962 to March 24, 1965. It was meant to crash probes into the moon and collect the resulting data. These probes were far more successful. So Rangers 3 through 6 were all disasters, but they were disasters in different ways. So to start off, Ranger 3 was launched and it seemed like it would complete its mission. But then during the mission, the probe used too much thrust, so it moved so fast that when transferring orbits, it was 14 hours early, meaning it just missed the moon. Now it orbits the sun with Pioneer 4, somewhere out there. Ranger 4, on the other hand, was the first spacecraft to reach the moon. Even though it accomplished its job of impacting the moon full force, technical problems prevented the data from being collected. And by technical problems, I mean the central computer broke, so mission important data couldn't be sent back, so we basically got nothing. Ranger 5 had a malfunction for about 15 minutes after launch where the solar panel and battery connection just didn't work, so the battery eventually died. Ranger 6 impacted the moon, accomplished its goal, but the camera's power supply short-circuited, so it just doesn't count. No footage, so no success. So Rangers 7, 8, and 9. There is a 7, 8, 9 joke there, and I guess that's what happened. However, these spacecraft were able to complete their mission. They crashed into the moon, providing us with some of the first close-up photos of the moon for the United States. The lunar orbiter missions were designed to orbit the moon and then take pictures of potential future landing spots. These missions lasted from August 10, 1966 to January 31, 1968. All 5 of these missions were pretty much successful. Lunar orbiters 1 through 5 were all pretty similar with very few major differences, but I'll mention 2 of the notable ones. One of them being that Lunar Orbiter 1 became the first spacecraft by America to orbit the moon and the first spacecraft to take photos from the moon's orbit. The other difference being that when Lunar Orbiter 4 was sent to the moon, it was sent to orbit along a polar orbit instead of an equilateral orbit. The end result of the Lunar Orbiter missions was when they used all their usefulness up, they were discarded and crashed straight into the moon's surface. The Surveyor missions lasted from May 30th, 1966 to February 21st, 1968. The goal of these missions was to land remote-controlled probes to the moon's surface to gather surface data and photos. Surveyor 1 was the first probe landed on the moon by America. The location of this first landing, according to NASA, was landed in the southwestern region of the Ocean of Storms at 6:17:36 UT, June 2nd, 1966. Touchdown coordinates were announced as 2.46 degrees south latitude and 43.32 degrees west longitude. This mission led to many of the first photos from the surface of the moon, including a panoramic view. The footage presented is a reconstructed panoramic from the mission I found at planetary.org, which I plugged into Blender, warped to look somewhat normal, and am now rotating so you can get an idea of what the moon panorama looked like. Now credit to Philip Stoke, since he was the one to make the reconstructed one according to planetary.org, when the original one looked like this. Surveyor 2 was a failed Surveyor mission, and it failed when one of the engines failed. The craft lost control and crashed into the moon, the location of which, according to NASA, the spacecraft crashed on the surface of the moon at 5 degrees 30 minutes north latitude and 12 degrees west longitude, just southeast of the Copernicus crater. Surveyor 3 was a success story, however, collecting data and landing properly. According to NASA, it landed in the southeastern region of Avotius Procellarum at 3 degrees south latitude and 23.41 degrees west longitude. The notable fact about this mission that makes it important is that it was visited by the crew of Apollo 12, and they collected data and took photos. To move on to Surveyor 4, it seemed like it would be a success mission, but the probe stopped responding to communications about 2 minutes before landing. It just ghosted NASA, and we don't know what it's doing today. Surveyor 5, Surveyor 6, and Surveyor 7 were all pretty similar with their landings, with Surveyor 5 landing, and I quote, in the southeastern region of Mare Tranquillitas at 1.42 degrees north latitude and 23.2 degrees east longitude. The Surveyor 6 landing was, and I quote, in the Sinus Medii at coordinates announced as 0.46 degrees north latitude and 1.37 degrees west longitude. Finally, the Surveyor 7 landing spot, according to NASA, the landing coordinates were 40.97 degrees south latitude and 11.44 degrees west longitude, about 18 miles north of Tycho's rim and 1.5 miles from its target. The next set of missions are the Apollo missions, but we're skipping those, so there's a giant gap there. And then you got the missions in the 1980s, there's nothing there, so we're just going to skip that too. And then we got the miscellaneous missions. After over a decade of pretty much nothing, they resumed the missions with the Clementine mission. The goal of the Clementine mission was to analyze the moon. On the way to an asteroid, it discovered some potential locations for ice and provided a full picture of the moon's surface. The Lunar Prospector mission was a probe that attempted to find lunar locations where there could be ice. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter was an orbiter that was designed to make a 3D map of the moon's surface. The Lacrosse mission was an orbiter that orbited the moon and discovered ice near the South Pole. The Artemis mission, which is still going on right now, is a mission that was designed for 2 subsets of satellites to orbit on opposite sides of the moon. The purpose of this mission was to help measure the magnetic field of the moon. The Grail mission involved 2 different satellites that were pretty close to each other, and these probes are supposed to stagger back and forth along the same orbit so that they can gain data on the moon's gravitational field. Finally, the LADEE mission was launched in order to orbit the moon and study the almost non-existent atmosphere. The atmosphere that they were studying, according to NASA, is so thin that its molecules do not collide with each other. And that's the moon missions. These moon missions, although not as well known as the Apollo missions, were pretty cool. I hope you all enjoyed that information, and have a good day.